I actually want you to close your eyes for a second.
Okay.
We're going to take a trip back in time to start this deep dive, but, and I have to warn you right up front, it is not going to be a pretty trip.
Well, that is a very specific and frankly kind of unpleasant request to start with.
No, I know. But it's crucial because we're going to the early morning of April 14th, 1903. We're standing on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and before we even look at anything, I want you to imagine the smell.
Right, because this isn't that sort of romanticized, sterilized version of historical New York we see in the movie.
Exactly. It is dawn. It has been raining all night long. Just this cold, miserable drizzle. The air is incredibly heavy.
Yeah.
And you have this thick, choking stench rolling right off the East River. And it's mixing with the horse manure that's just coating the cobblestones, plus the rotting garbage piled up against all these tenements. Because, you know, sanitation wasn't exactly a priority back then.
Right, it creates a very visceral setting. Specifically, we are standing on East 11th Street. And if you look around this area, poverty isn't just a statistic. It is the literal texture of the world around you.
Yeah.
You see peeling paint on the tenements, these failing livery stables, billboards that are just sort of held up by rusting scrap iron. It is a gray, grim landscape where survival really is the only daily goal.
And walking right through this grim landscape is a woman named Frances Connors. She is a cleaning woman, probably exhausted before her day is even officially started. And she's just heading out to buy some rolls for breakfast.
Just a normal morning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She's walking past a lumberyard, Mallet and Handles lumberyard, which is just as beat up as everything else on the block. But then she sees something that breaks the pattern of the street.
Right, an object that absolutely does not belong there.
A sugar barrel.
Yeah.
Just a standard wooden sugar barrel sitting right there on the pavement.
Now, in 1903, trash on the street isn't unusual at all.
No, not at all. But this barrel is different. It is covered by an old, heavy overcoat. It's totally out of place. So Frances is curious, or maybe just confused by it. She steps a bit closer. She doesn't touch it, but she peers at it.
And that right there is the exact moment the barrel mystery begins.
She screams. And the reports, from the time they make it very clear this wasn't a little yelp of surprise. This was a blood-curdling scream that woke the entire block.
Wow.
Heads are popping out of tenement windows up and down the street. People are running over in their night clothes because inside that barrel, stuffed completely underneath that dirty coat, is a man.
And the condition of this man, it shook even the hardened beat cops of that precinct.
Yeah.
This wasn't a simple mugging gone wrong. The man had been forced into this container. His knees were jammed violently up against his chest just to make him fit. But it was the nature of the wound itself that was so shocking.
His throat.
It was savage. The cut was so deep and so incredibly violent that the head was practically severed from the body. It was a message. This wasn't just a killing, it was a butchery.
This gruesome discovery is our entry point today. But I want to be really clear with you right off the bat. We are not just telling a ghost story today or doing some standard true crime procedural.
No, we're looking at something much bigger.
We are looking at the exact moment the American Mafia, the real Mafia, announced its arrival.
Exactly. We are doing a deep dive into the source material called The First Family by Mike Dash. And I love this source because Dash does something that most historians of the mob completely fail to do.
What's that?
He ignores the movies, he ignores The Godfather, he ignores all those romantic rumors passed down in cafes over the decades.
He actually went to the archives.
He went straight to the bedrock. He dug up 59 volumes of daily Secret Service reports from the turn of the century.
Wow.
Yeah, these are primary documents that have essentially been sitting in the National Archives, largely untouched, for 100 years.
And that is such a crucial distinction we need to make for you listening right now. Usually when we hear about the early mob, our brains immediately jump to the 1930s. We think of Lucky Luciano, Al Capone, Prohibition. We think of Tommy guns and speakeasies.
We tend to think the Mafia just spontaneously started with bootlegging. But Dash is arguing and proving with these documents that the roots go much, much deeper. Back to this specific period between 1892 and 1930.
The early days.
This is the true origin story of the Morello family. They were the pioneers. They were the ones who brought the strict organizational structure of Sicily and planted it directly into the chaotic soil of New York City.
And the authorities were just completely unprepared.
Prepared is a very generous word. They were blind to it.
Yeah.
You have the NYPD, which we were going to discuss, which was, let's say, limited in its capabilities at the time.
Yeah.
And heavily politicized. And then you have the Secret Service.
Yeah.
And the Secret Secret Service accidentally stumbles into a full-blown war with the mob while they're just trying to hunt down counterfeiters and protect the US dollar.
It's this incredible collision of three completely different worlds. You have the desperate, grinding poverty of Little Italy. You have the corrupt bureaucracy of the police department. And you have this new, terrifying criminal sophistication being imported straight from Corleone.
And sitting right at the center of all of it is this body stuffed in a sugar barrel.
So, to understand how a well-dressed man ends up folded into a barrel on East 11th Street, we can't actually start with the discovery. We have to rewind the clock a bit.
We need to go back to the night before.
April 14th, roughly 3:00 a.m.
So we are shifting scenes now. We are leaving the gray, wet dawn of the lumberyard, and we are entering a saloon on Prince Street. This is deep in the heart of the Italian Quarter.
And the source material paints such a vivid, almost claustrophobic picture of this place. It is outwardly advertised as a spaghetti restaurant, but that is a massive euphemism. This place is a dive.
It's a working men's saloon. Very rough.
Imagine the floor is just completely covered in sawdust.
Yeah.
And that is not for aesthetic reasons.
No.
It is strictly functional. It's there to catch the spit, the spilled beer, the stray onion skins, and the cigar butts. The air inside is thick with the smell of stale garlic and burning gas lamps.
It's hazy with cheap tobacco smoke.
Exactly. And sitting right there in the corner eating a bowl of beans and beets is our victim.
Benedetto Madonia.
Let's profile him for a second, because he sticks out like a sore thumb in a place like this.
He really does. Madonia is 43 years old. He is a handsome man. He has this high forehead, a very neatly waxed mustache curled up at the ends. He carries himself with a certain dignity.
But the detail that the Secret Service and later the police really zeroes in on is his hands.
Yes, they aren't working men's hands.
Not at all.
They are soft, they're manicured. He is wearing a very sharp suit, a stiff high collar. He claims to the world to be a stonemason, but looking at him, he is clearly not hauling rocks or mixing cement for a living.
No way.
He looks like a man of some serious means, but here he is at 3 a.m. in this filth-strewn saloon, and he is absolutely terrified.
The source notes, he was a stranger to the city, right? He was so unfamiliar with New York that he actually needed an escort just to navigate the basic streets of Little Italy.
That isolation definitely adds to the terror he's feeling. You have to imagine the soundscape of this room around him. It is not just Italian being spoken.
Right.
It is a very specific Sicilian dialect, one heavily influenced by Arabic and Spanish, mutated by the intense isolation of the tiny villages it came from. To an outsider, it's almost a secret code.
So he can't even understand the conversations happening around him.
Barely.
Yeah.
Madonia knows he is surrounded. He knows he is in extreme danger.
He's probably watching the door like a hog. Every single time it opens, he flinches.
Yeah.
He's looking at the other men in the bar who are just muttering in the corners, eyeing him. And then the door opens for real.
Yeah.
And the man who walks in, this is one of those historical figures that is almost too villainous to be real. It feels like fiction.
Enter Giuseppe Morello.
The clutch hand.
The boss of bosses. Even just the name Morello carried a weight in that neighborhood that we can barely comprehend today. But physically, the man was the stuff of absolute nightmares.
Describe the hand for us.
Yes.
Because it is his defining feature.
He had a severe congenital birth defect. His right arm was stunted. It was significantly shorter than his left arm. And the hand itself was it was a claw. It was missing the thumb and the first 4 fingers. It was essentially just a stump with a single little pinky finger protruding from it.
And he didn't try to hide it.
He usually kept it draped under a shawl or a coat, but everyone in the room knew it was there. And combined with his face, the source describes his voice as cold and parched, and his eyes as looking like black holes. He projected this aura of absolute inhuman dread.
So he walks into the saloon, and he is not alone. He's with his muscle.
Tommaso Petto, universally known as the Ox.
Fitting name.
A man who is exactly what his nickname suggests. He has massive physical strength, but very little cognitive processing power. He is basically a weapon to be pointed by Morello.
You can just imagine the entire room going dead silent. The men in that bar know exactly who Morello is. They show him this fearful deference.
Absolutely.
Morello slowly approaches Madonia, and this isn't some long, drawn-out conversation. There is no negotiation happening here. There's no pleading.
No. The historical record speculates that only one single word was likely spoken by Morello.
Nemico. Enemy. That's it. That is the final verdict. That's the death sentence.
What happens next is just a blur of violence. But it is, and this is what's so disturbing, and is professional violence. That's what really struck me reading the reports. They don't just pull out guns and start shooting.
Right, because gunfire is loud. Gunfire brings the beat cop running. Gunfire panics the horses out on the street.
Exactly. This is an execution happening inside a crowded tenement building. It needs to be quiet. So Morello gives the slightest signal. Two men immediately grab Madonia. He struggles, obviously, but he is completely overpowered.
And they drag him toward the back of the room.
Yeah.
To a rusting iron sink in the corner.
The sink. This detail is so chillingly practical. It strongly suggests they had done this exact routine before.
It's industrial efficiency applied to murder.
They forcefully bend his head back over the iron basin. One man stabs him deep in the neck with a stiletto, a heavy 14-inch blade. This was likely done to stun him or sever the spinal cord so he physically can't stop them. And then the ox, pedo, slashes the throat. But they don't just let him drop to the floor.
They hold him there.
They hold his body up, they wait, they let the blood drain directly down into the sink pipe.
So they don't stain the sawdust on the floor.
Exactly. It is literal housekeeping. They wait until his heart stops pumping, then they fold his body up, they jam him into that empty sugar barrel, throw in some fresh sawdust to soak up any remaining leakage, cover him with the coat, and wheel him out the back door to a decrepit one-horse wagon.
It's treated like a routine business transaction, a problem simply being removed. And that horrific sequence brings us right back to Francis Connors screaming on East 11th Street a few hours later.
Dawn breaks.
The body is found. The police are frantically called. And this is where we get a really fascinating look at the NYPD of 1903. And honestly, it is pretty embarrassing.
It really is. We have to completely strip away our modern CSI expectations here. There is no yellow crime scene tape. There are no police photographers showing up yet. Forensic science is in its absolute infancy.
Patrolman John Winters is the first officer on the scene. He sees the barrel. He sees the coat. What is his immediate reaction?
Dumped it out.
He just tips the barrel over.
Right into the gutter. Right into the mud and the puddles we described earlier.
Unbelievable.
I mean, he wants to check if the guy is still alive, which is fair from a first responder perspective, but in doing so, he completely destroys the immediate crime scene. He spills the sawdust everywhere, he muddies the victim's clothes, he ruins any subtle evidence.
So the body is just lying there in the muck.
Yeah.
Massive crowd is gathering. But then the detectives finally show up, and we have a very interesting contrast here between the two main investigators. We have the work bee, and we have the show pony.
The worker bee is Sergeant Arthur Carey. He is the homicide specialist. He is actually highly competent. He knows the neighborhood well. He immediately gets down and starts going through the pockets of the dead man.
And what does he find in there?
A crucifix, a date stamp, a single penny, and a handkerchief that is absolutely drenched in cheap perfume.
But no wallet, no ID.
Nothing at all. And interestingly, Carey notices the labels on his clothes have been meticulously cut out with a razor. Someone went out of their way to ensure this man stayed a John Doe.
So Carey's doing the actual gritty work. But then his boss arrives on the scene, Inspector George McCluskey.
Chesty George.
Chesty George. I mean, that sounds like a cartoon caricature.
He was a massive character. He was the head of the detective bureau. He was handsome, incredibly arrogant, and he absolutely loved to see his own name in the daily papers.
A real glory hound.
He walks onto the scene, looks down at the body, looks around at the Italian crowd, and basically just shrugs. To him, this is just another Italian feud.
He's dismissing the entire thing before he has even investigated it.
It is the systemic bias of the era. The police hierarchy viewed Little Italy as this self-contained zone of chaos. The prevailing attitude was, as long as they killed each other and didn't hurt real Americans, the police didn't really care that much.
Right.
McCluskey wants a very quick arrest to look good in the press, but he has zero desire to dig deep into the whys or hows.
But thankfully, there is one man on the force who is perfectly willing to dig. And he is arguably the real hero of this story. Joe Petrosino.
The absolute legend. Joe Petrosino is someone who genuinely deserves his own prestige movie.
Oh, for sure.
He was an Italian immigrant himself. A very short guy, about 5'3", though he wore lifts, but he was built like a tank. 300 pounds of solid muscle. They said his face was pockmarked and his head was shaped like a summer squash.
A summer squash. That is not a very flattering description.
No, but nobody dared say it to his face. He was utterly fearless. And he was brilliant. His entire official mandate from the NYPD was to police his own people, to drive the Italian criminals out of New York City.
And Sergeant Carey calls him in?
Yes, because Carey knows Petrosino understands the cultural signs and the neighborhood nuances that the Irish cops completely miss.
And this is where the investigation takes a major pivot. They stop staring at the dead body, and they start looking closely at the barrel itself.
Because the barrel is the smoking gun, Petrosino and Carey start analyzing the debris trapped at the bottom. They see the bloody sawdust, sure, but they also find those onion skins and those very specific Italian cigar butts.
Which immediately tells Petrosino what?
It tells him this barrel didn't come from someone's private house. This came from a business, specifically a restaurant or a saloon.
And then Carey does something that I just love. It is so unbelievably low-tech but brilliant. He leans deep into the barrel, scrapes a few loose granules of wood from the interior staves, and just puts them right on his tongue.
He literally tastes the crime scene.
Yeah, what is it?
Sure.
So now they have a working profile. A sugar barrel from a saloon-like environment. But a sugar barrel is a mass-produced item. There are thousands of them. How on earth do they track one specific barrel in a city of millions in 1903?
They get a little lucky. And they get incredibly diligent. They find a very faint, faded stencil on the bottom of the wood. It says W and T. And next to it, a serial number, G.223.
Now, today, we would just run that alphanumeric through a supply chain database and have the answer in 3 seconds.
Right.
But in 1903...
In 1903, that means putting on your heavy boots and walking. Carey spends the entire day trudging to different sugar refineries scattered all across the city. He's knocking on doors, showing the stencil to foremen. Finally, after hours of this, he hits pay dirt at a place called Wallace & Thompson.
With Dewey and T.
Exactly. And their shipping records show that G223 wasn't just any random shipment. It was a very specific custom order of 6 hoopless barrels. And they have the name and address of the buyer.
This feels like the massive break in the case. Who bought those barrels?
A man named Pietro Inzerillo. He runs a pastry shop, a pasticceria, right in the heart of Little Italy.
Inzerillo. Okay, so the police have their target. They rush over to the pastry shop. They confront him.
And Inzerillo just plays it incredibly cool. He admits it right away. He says, sure, I buy sugar barrels. I run a pastry shop. Of course I need sugar.
Logical.
But when they ask him about this specific barrel, the one found with a mutilated body stuffed inside it, he just shrugs. He says, I throw all my empty barrels out in the alley behind the shop. Anyone walking by could have taken it.
Wow, the classic I don't know nothing defense.
And the worst part is it works. It is perfect, plausible deniability. Petrosino knows he's lying, but the police are stuck. They have a solid link to the shop, but they don't have a shred of actual proof that Inzerillo or his associates killed the man.
They don't even know who the dead man is yet.
Exactly. They have a victim with no name, no face, and a barrel with an airtight alibi. The trail is rapidly going cold.
It would have gone completely cold, too. It would have just been another unsolved John Doe in the archives, if not for a massive, bizarre coincidence.
The parallel investigation.
But right, because while the police are running all over town tasting wood shavings, there is an entirely different federal agency watching the exact same group of men. And this is where the story gets really wild.
Enter the Secret Service.
Yes, and we need to reset our expectations for a moment here. When I say Secret Service today, you automatically picture stern men in black suits with earpieces walking aggressively next to the president's limousine.
Right, the ultimate bodyguards.
But in 1903, protecting the president was just a tiny, tiny fraction of their job. They were a branch of the Treasury Department. Their main mission, their actual reason for existing, was the currency. They were there to protect the American dollar.
90% of their budget and manpower was entirely dedicated to fighting counterfeiting.
Because fake money was an absolute pandemic back then.
It was a national crisis. The economy was regularly being flooded with incredibly good bad bills. And the man leading the fight for the Secret Service in the New York Bureau is a guy named William Flynn.
I love the physical description of Flynn in the source material. He is a former plumber, a former jail warden. The book says he basically looks like a sausage.
He absolutely does not look like James Bond or some master spy.
Not at all.
But you do not want to underestimate William Flynn. He is brilliant, he is incredibly patient, and he has been painstakingly building a massive federal case against a ring of counterfeiters operating out of Little Italy.
These counterfeiters were pushing fake $5 bills, right? The ones they called the Morristown Fives?
Correct. Very high-quality fakes. And Flynn has slowly traced the distribution of these bills back to one specific location, a butcher shop at 16 Stanton Street.
So, just to recap the board here, the police are hyper-focused on a pastry shop. The Secret Service is watching a butcher shop.
And completely unknown to both of these agencies, they're looking at 2 different arms of the exact same octopus. Flynn has his agents deep undercover. They are dressed up as street sweepers and laborers. They're hiding in doorways, shivering in the freezing rain for hours, just logging who comes and goes from 16 Stanton Street.
And this leads to the massive aha moment. The night before the murder, the evening of April 13th, Flynn actually decides to go down and check on the stakeout himself.
He is there personally on the street. He's watching the butcher shop from the shadows, and he sees the gang come out for the night. He sees Morello, the clutch hand. He sees Inzerillo, the pastry chef.
Call key players.
But he also sees a stranger.
A man he hasn't seen in all his months of surveillance.
Standing right under a street lamp, smoking a cigarette. Now, Flynn is a master detective. He takes a mental photograph of the scene. He notes the man's profile, the shape of the mustache, the high forehead, and he notes the suit. He clearly remembers the man is wearing a brown suit.
Cut to the very next day, April 14th. Flynn is sitting in his warm office on Wall Street. The morning papers are out, and the headlines are just screaming about this barrel mystery on the East Side.
Flynn casually picks up a copy of the New York Journal. This is William Randolph Hearst's paper. It is highly sensationalist, very lurid. They have broken basically every ethical rule of journalism and published a stark, graphic photo of the corpse lying right on the slab at the city morgue.
A massive breach of protocol, but an incredibly lucky one for history.
Flynn looks at the photo in the paper, and he completely freezes. The dead face on the slab is the exact face he saw under the street lamp.
It's the stranger.
It's the man he saw standing with Morello less than 24 hours ago.
But there is a snag.
A really big one. Flynn immediately sends his agents down to the morgue to verify it in person. They come back a few hours later and they say, "Boss, the face definitely matches, but the clothes do not. The dead man in the barrel is wearing a dark blue suit. You told us the guy you saw was wearing brown."
Now, most people in that situation would just say, okay, maybe he went home and changed clothes. Or maybe I'm just mistaken. It's a totally different guy.
But Flynn is obsessive. He absolutely trusts his own eyes, but he also understands basic physics. He thinks hard about the lighting situation on Stanton Street the night before. It wasn't daylight. It was a yellow electric arc lamp.
So he decides to set up an experiment.
Right in his Wall Street office. He officially requests the bloody clothes be brought to him from the police evidence room. He rigs up a light bulb at the exact same height and angle as the street lamp. He turns off all the other lights in the room. He puts the blue suit directly under the harsh yellow glow.
What happens?
It is a perfect optical illusion. Under that specific yellow light, the dark blue fabric appears completely brown.
That is incredible. It's just scientific deduction at its absolute finest.
It's undeniable proof for him. Flynn now knows for a fact the victim was with the Morello gang right before he died. He knows who killed him. So he picks up the telephone and he calls Inspector McCluskey. He says, "I know who your John Doe is."
And this moment, this one phone call is what ties the whole narrative together. Suddenly, this isn't just a random, isolated body stuffed in a barrel. It is a key that unlocks a much larger kingdom.
Exactly. Flynn opens up his files, his personal rogues gallery that he's been building, and he lays out the entire criminal network for the police. And this is where we really get to officially meet the first family.
Let's unpack this cast of characters for the listener, because Flynn knows these guys inside and out. He has been tracking their movements for months. We already met the boss, Giuseppe Morello, the clutch hand.
Right, and it is so important to understand, Morello isn't just some street thug who got lucky. He is originally from Corleone, Sicily. He was heavily suspected of murder and large-scale cattle rustling back in Italy before he even fled to America.
He has a serious pedigree.
He is incredibly smart, very cunning, and he is willing to use extreme theatrical violence to maintain order. He is the CEO of this new enterprise.
And his right-hand man, his underboss, is Ignazio Lupo.
Lupo the Wolf.
I mean, that is a terrifying nickname.
It fits him perfectly. Lupo was actually Morello's brother-in-law. He ran a legitimate chain of grocery stores and a large import-export business that served as the perfect front for their smuggling and counterfeiting operations.
But he wasn't just a businessman.
He was utterly ruthless. The Secret Service suspected him of personally committing up to 60 murders.
60? That is hard to even wrap your head around. It sounds like a serial killer.
It's staggering. But these weren't random acts of madness. These were disciplining actions. He was the primary enforcer of the will of the family. If you stepped out of line, Lupo paid you a visit.
Then we have the muscle layer. We already met Tommaso Petto the ox, who wielded the knife. And there was another huge guy, Flynn, identified in his files. Joseph Finaro.
Right, a red-headed giant. He was 6'4", which was massive for that era. The Secret Service agents had actually documented Finaro escorting the victim, Madonia, around town earlier in the week.
So they were essentially babysitting him, making sure he didn't run to the cops or skip town.
Precisely. Flynn's intel is flawless. He can place the victim physically with the killers. He can place the victim at the scene. And now, thanks to his deep files, they can finally figure out exactly why Madonia was killed in the first place.
The motive. Because Madonia wasn't just some innocent tourist who walked into the wrong bar.
No, not at all. Benedetto Madonia was a brother-in-law to a currently jailed gang member named Giuseppe Di Priamo. Madonia was part of the outer periphery of the gang. He acted as a traveling courier, selling the counterfeit Morristown Fives for them in other cities.
So he was an employee, essentially. A mid-level distributor.
In a way, yes. But here is the rub that got him killed. Madonia's brother-in-law, Di Priamo, was sitting in a jail cell. Madonia, trying to be a good family man, had sent $1,000 of his own hard-earned money directly to Morello.
And the deal was what?
The strict deal was, Morello uses that money to hire a top-tier lawyer, grease some palms, and get the brother-in-law out of jail.
And $1,000 in 1903. I mean, that is a house. That is an entire life savings for most people.
It is an absolute fortune. And Morello, he just kept it.
He just kept it.
He didn't hire the lawyer. He didn't bribe anyone. He just pocketed the cash and left the guy to rot.
That is so cold.
Well, Madonia eventually finds out. He comes all the way to New York, and he is furious. He confronts Morello directly. He demands his money back, or he demands immediate justice for his relative. And fatally, he threatens to go to the police and expose the counterfeiting ring if he doesn't get it.
And you just do not threaten the clutch hand.
You do not. That was his fatal mistake. The second he made that threat, he was labeled a inimico, an enemy, a rat. And that is exactly why he ended up folded in half in a sugar barrel. It wasn't just a robbery, it was silencing a potential leak in the most dramatic way possible.
So Flynn has essentially handed this entire case to the NYPD on a silver platter. We have the identified victim, we have the specific killers, we have the exact motive, we have the location of the murder, we even have an eyewitness placing them together, Flynn himself.
Everything you need.
This should be an absolute slam dunk. The good guys win, the mob goes away, roll the credits.
You would really think so. But this is where the story shifts gears and turns into a massive tragedy of bureaucracy and male ego.
We're moving into section 5 of the deep dive now. The clash of strategies. And honestly, this part frustrates me more than the actual gruesome murder itself.
It is infuriating. It's the midnight meeting. It is the dead of night, April 15th, going into the 16th. Flynn summons Inspector McCluskey to the Treasury building. It's late. The huge stone building is completely quiet. Flynn lays it all out on the desk. He shows McCluskey the organization chart. He connects the barrel, the victim, the shop, the money.
He basically hands him the keys to the kingdom.
He does. But Flynn has a condition. A very specific, very important condition before they move forward. He looks at McCluskey and says, "Do not arrest them yet."
Wait, why? He knows they did it. Why wait?
Because Flynn is playing the long game. He is smart. He knows that right now in a court of law, all they have is circumstantial evidence for the murder. They don't have the bloody knife. They don't have a reliable witness to the actual stabbing inside the saloon. If they arrest them right now, the gang will just clam up completely.
How Merta.
Exactly. The sacred code of silence. Flynn knows perfectly well that if you arrest a hardcore Sicilian mafioso without hard, physical, undeniable proof, you get absolutely nothing out of them.
And Flynn also has his own agenda, right? The counterfeiting ring.
Right, he hasn't forgotten his main job. He spent months building this massive federal case. He wants to keep watching them. He wants to catch them physically printing the fake money. He wants to catch them red-handed with the murder weapon.
He wants intel.
He wants to map out the entire nationwide network so he can take the whole thing down in one giant swoop.
So Flynn desperately wants to wait. He wants to use the surveillance to weave a tighter noose. But McCluskey, Chesty George, what does he want out of this?
He wants immediate action. He sees the giant newspaper headlines dancing in his head. Police smash barrel murder ring.
Yeah.
He wants to round every single one of them up immediately the next afternoon, just in time to catch the evening papers. He wants the personal glory of the arrest.
It's personal glory over actual good police work. Right. It is the classic short-term gain versus long-term victory.
It really is. Flynn is absolutely appalled. He argues fiercely with McCluskey. He says, look, if you raid them now, you will blow everything. You will tip them off that we have been watching them this whole time.
But McCluskey ignores him.
Completely ignores him. He abruptly leaves the meeting at 1:15 a.m. and immediately starts preparing his officers for the raids.
And Flynn, what does he do?
Flynn sits down alone in his dark office, completely defeated. He drafts a resignation note, or rather a deeply apologetic note to his boss in Washington. He knows in his bones that his months of grueling work, his undercover agents freezing out in the rain, it's all about to be totally wasted.
So McCluskey does the raids. He rounds them all up the very next day.
It is a massive, highly publicized operation. He kicks down the doors. He arrests Morello, Petto, Lupo, and Cirillo, the whole top crew. It makes a huge splash in the papers. Police solve mystery. The public cheers. McCluskey takes a bow.
But did they actually solve it? Did they get convictions?
No. That is the tragedy of this whole thing. Because just as Flynn accurately predicted, they had zero hard proof. And the potential witnesses were absolutely terrified.
What about the local barber? Or the people who were drinking in the saloon that night?
They all suddenly developed a severe case of amnesia. They told the cops, I saw nothing, I know nothing, I wasn't even there. And the suspects, Morello and his guys, they just sat in the interrogation room and smiled. They knew the police had nothing on them.
So they walked. They just walked out of the station.
Most of them, yes. Petto the Ox was the only one officially charged with the murder at first, mainly because he had a large knife on him when he was arrested.
But it wasn't the murder weapon.
No, it didn't match the wounds. So even he was eventually released without trial. The rest of the leadership were let go entirely for lack of evidence.
And the Secret Service counterfeiting investigation.
Blown. Completely blown to pieces. The gang knew they were being heavily watched now, so they went deep underground. They moved their printing presses. They changed their routes. Flynn's months of careful surveillance were incinerated in a single afternoon of police grandstanding.
So basically, because Inspector McCluskey couldn't wait a few more weeks, because he desperately needed that front-page headline, the first family of the Mafia survived.
They didn't just survive, they thrived because of this. This was the exact moment where the American Mafia firmly established its terrifying reputation. They proved to the streets that they could commit a brutal, messy murder, leave the body out in public, get arrested by the top brass, and still walk away completely free.
It sent a massive message to the whole neighborhood.
A terrifying message, it said. The police cannot protect you. We are stronger than the law. We are untouchable.
This brings us to a really important broader context.
Yeah.
We hear these terms thrown around a lot in history books, Black Hand and Mafia. Are they the exact same thing? Because the papers at the time seem to confuse them constantly.
That is a great question, and it's a distinction that Mike Dash makes very, very clearly in the book. The press at the time called everything the Black Hand. It was a lazy catch-all term for any Italian crime. But the Black Hand wasn't actually an organization.
It was a method, right?
Exactly. It was just basic extortion. Writing a threatening letter with a little drawing of a skull and crossbones saying, give me $500 or I blow up your bakery. Literally any two guys with a piece of paper and a postage stamp could be the Black Hand. It wasn't organized.
But the Mafia, the Morello gang.
This was entirely different. This was a fraternity, a brotherhood of men of respect. It was highly organized, hierarchical. They had the strict omerta code. They had formal initiation rituals. This was essentially a parallel state operating within a state.
And that omerta factor is so real. Even the victim's own wife, when the police finally tracked her down later, she absolutely wouldn't talk to them.
No. The police sat her down. They told her, we know exactly who killed your husband. We know it was Morello. Help us put him away.
And she refused.
Point blank. She knew that if she talked to the cops, she was dead too. Her children might be dead. She knew that the reach of the Morello family was far longer and far more brutal than the reach of the NYPD.
It is a level of psychological discipline that the local police just weren't ready for.
They were playing checkers while Morello was playing 3D chess.
I really want to talk about the final fate of these characters.
Yeah.
Because even though they escaped the barrel murder rap, they didn't exactly all live happily ever after.
Let's start with the hero of the NYPD side, Joe Petrosino.
This is truly the saddest part of the entire story. Petrosino continued his crusade against the mob. he took very personally.
Yeah.
In 1909, which is 6 years after the Beryl murder, he actually sailed over to Sicily.
His master plan was to go to the local courthouses in Sicily, dig up the official criminal records of all these gangsters operating in New York, and use those Italian records to formally deport them from America. It was actually a brilliant legal strategy.
But going into the lion's den alone like that,
It was suicide. The Morello family knew he was coming before his boat even docked. They sent a telegram back to Sicily. Petrosino was brutally murdered in Palermo, shot down in the cobblestone street while he was waiting for an informant.
devastating. He was such a true pioneer in law enforcement.
He was the very first NYPD officer ever killed in the line of duty overseas. A genuine martyr for the cause.
What about the monsters of the story, Morello and Lupo? Do they just get away with it forever?
Well, William Flynn didn't give up. That is the one truly redeeming note here. Flynn kept hunting them. He's like a dog with a bone. He rebuilt his case from scratch. And finally, in 1910, 7 long years after the Beryl murder, he nailed them.
But not for murder.
No, for counterfeiting.
The classic Al Capone strategy. You can't get him on the blood, you get him on the money.
Exactly. Flynn finally got the hard evidence he needed. He caught them red-handed with the printing plates and the fake bills. Morello and Lupo were prosecuted and sentenced to very long federal prison terms, 25 and 30 years. It temporarily broke the back of the family.
But the seeds had already been sown.
Yes. While they were sitting in jail, other figures rose up to take their place. Ciro Terranova, known as the Artichoke King, who became a massive boss, and eventually the new modern generation took over. Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky. But they all stood firmly on the structural shoulders of the Morello family.
And poor Madonia. His death was the brutal warning that started it all.
It established the ultimate reputation. The Beryl murder became a dark symbol in the underworld, it said. We can touch you anywhere, we can butcher you, stuff you in a barrel, leave you right out on the street for the world to see, and the police cannot touch us. It was the ultimate power move.
It is such a heavy, fascinating story. It has got everything. A gruesome crime, a brilliant federal detective, a massive clash of egos, and the literal birth of the criminal empire.
And it is all entirely true. That is what makes Mike Dash's book, The First Family, so compelling. It strips away all the Hollywood movie myths and just shows you the dirty, gritty, bureaucratic reality of how it actually happened.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's go back to that one lingering what if.
The what if absolutely haunts me.
If McCluskey had just listened to Flynn, if he had swallowed his pride, sat on his hands, and let the Secret Service continue their surveillance.
Think about it. Flynn might have mapped out the entire national network. He might have caught them in the act of a capital crime with undeniable proof. He could have legally decapitated the entire organization in 1903.
Could the American Mafia have been strangled in its crib?
It is very, very possible. Without Morello's strict leadership in those critical early foundational years, maybe the organization just fractures into small street gangs. Maybe it never gains that massive, unshakable foothold in New York politics and business. The entire history of organized crime in America could have been completely different. We might not even know what the word mafia means today.
But instead, McCluskey needed a headline. And we got the clutch hand becoming a terrifying legend.
A man with one single finger on his right hand who managed to hold the entire New York underworld in an iron grip. It is a profoundly terrifying legacy.
It really is. Well, that is all for this deep dive into the Beryl mystery and the birth of the Morello family. It is a story of what happened, but also a very tragic story of what could have happened if two agencies had just worked together.
A harsh lesson for the ages.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking this grim trip back to 1903 with us. And as always, stay curious.